All right, everyone. Today we are going to be talking about Song of the Risen God, which is book 3 in the Coven trilogy by R.A. Salvatore. Um, I've been kind of saying through a lot of these books that it was very much going to depend on this book on whether or not I like the series. I do think I do have a feeling that there's going to be another trilogy that follows this that takes place after this that has all the surviving characters in it. Just because there's a lot of pieces I feel like set up in this book, but I believe this is the end of this arc of the story. Um, I should probably start off by saying that there probably will be spoilers for this book, so if you don't want it spoiled, you know, close out of the video now. But I I don't want to say that I did not like the ending here. Um it's not that I thought it was super bad or anything. Like, it was just kind of mediocre, which was a little bit disappointing. Um I think the biggest pros about it is the character of Owlin. I think that she really is the shining star throughout the entirety of these 3 books. And especially within these books, I feel like her and Adrian were like the only 2 characters I could really get behind. Um, Whereas a lot of the other characters I felt like were just kind of there. And they ended up introducing monks of the Abelican Church and stuff like that in this book that were like new characters to this book. I believe they weren't introduced in the last book, but sometimes he does weave in like small characters that I kind of forget about. But I don't believe they were introduced in the last book. I think they were just introduced at the very beginning of this book. And like, I did enjoy them as we went later into this book. But the problem is this is the end of a trilogy, and you're introducing these new characters while you have all these other characters you've already introduced who we barely get to see. Like, Talmadge is a big one. You know, he was like a big character in the first book and a minor-ish character in the second book, I would say. And then he's kind of like forgotten in this book. Um, like Badlan was another character that was like I felt like was really interesting, and then he was just kind of like pushed to the side for people like Adrian who come from the previous trilogies and series that happened before the Demon War saga happens before these books. While they're not a direct sequel, the events I would say in this book in particular are very like you almost need like to have the full context. You really need to have read those books, whereas the first 2 I felt like you didn't need those were like this was like a new story. This book was very much like we go back to Hans the Bear, we go and see all these old places that we've seen before. A lot of old characters end up coming back, and I don't I didn't like that. I could have seen that happening further in maybe till like another trilogy or something like that. But like in this, it felt very much like close to the chest, very like around, um, these lake villages and stuff like that. Whereas in this book, it was very much like, okay, we gotta piece out of here and we gotta go get allies and stuff like that, and we go back to these old lands, and there's like a little bit of like, I feel like playing on nostalgia for these old places, but I didn't want to see the old places. I wanted to see these new places and like explore those more and keep it a little bit more, contained. Um, so yeah, I mean that was a little disappointing to me. I think I'm not gonna harp on this book for too long. I'm gonna keep this pretty short, but I think like another, like, I just didn't, when I was reading this or listening to it, I didn't really get like that. There wasn't that drive to finish the book that I get when I know that I'm like really into a book. I did want to finish it, because I finish everything that I read, but it didn't really like, it wasn't pulling me along. There was a lot of parts that were just very like dull, and there was quite a few points where I was like, this feels very convenient for the plot rather than like setting up, doing all these setups and payoffs. It was just very much like I need to conclude this trilogy, but I've set up a villain that I don't think that I can figure out a way for them to beat on their own. So I'm gonna just take the easy way out and have them bring back all these old characters so that they can, win in a way. And I just feel like you really didn't need to do that. The last thing I'll say is, this is a huge, and like so far I haven't really spoiled a whole lot of stuff, but this is a huge spoiler for the ending. Um, but I need to talk about it because it's one of the things that I think that is a huge problem, which is Adrian came back in this book very strongly, and I really liked his arc throughout the series. I just feel like what ended up happening, because he was such a big character in the previous, in the Demon War saga, books 5 through 7, that they set up like his, this book, these deal with like his redemption and stuff like that, and which I thought was kind of cool because it was nice to see. But this book felt very much like almost overtaken by him. Like he was just such a big presence that it like kind of pushed out all these other side characters that were newer that I'd rather have seen more of. And it was kind of like him and Owlin were like, that was like, it was like their book. And then he ends up dying in the end, which could be good, but I don't know, it just felt very hollow. It felt like a very weak way to kill him off. They're fighting the big bad of the of this trilogy, and it was just very much, there were some good elements to it, but I just didn't have any emotional impact from it. It just felt very much like oh, he's dead, and I actually thought he was gonna come back. And I think that the reason I was feeling like that is because I don't, because the plot got like the story went from being this very small contained piece to trying to expand and incorporate back into these old parts of the world we were in. We lost sight of the stakes for the characters. Like the stakes are like, oh, the world's gonna end and stuff like that, but world-ending stakes don't always have good like tension in them, because us as a reader, we end up understanding that like, okay, this is definitely not going to be the end of the world. There's going to be more beyond this. So they end up feeling very hollow, and I felt like that was the only thing at stake in this book, and it did not. I just didn't believe it as a reader. I just felt like it was very empty stake. And so I think that like a big thing could have been containing this story into a smaller part of the world, like really focusing on where we're at. And then after the events of this, and maybe they lose, maybe they don't win here, maybe they just get beaten, and maybe Adrian does still die or something like that, and Alan has to leave with the few survivors that they have. But then you could go into telling more of a larger story in a follow-up trilogy, or if you were extending this, to be more books, you could do that. But like trying to I feel like it's changing the tempo and like the pacing and stuff like that so much just really jarred me at the end, and I didn't particularly like it. Again, I don't think this series is. I don't want to say it's bad because I have read really bad books. Um, However, it's not something I would probably recommend to people. I think that the best Salvatore books are probably the first 6 to 10 books. Those are including the prequel, the original prequel books of The Legend of Driss, and probably the first 3 books of the Demon Wars saga. I actually think the first 3 books of the Demon Wars saga are some of my favorite books by him, but that's also talking from a nostalgia point of view. So I'm a little biased in that, but I definitely don't think I'd recommend this to many people. I think there's better books out there. I think there's better books by him to read that I'd recommend first. But I mean, if you like his writing style and stuff like that, these are not super long. I think this one was like a 17-hour audiobook, so they're not too terrible to get through. But there's other things you could be reading and stuff like that, which I probably would recommend. All right, I think that's going to be it for this one. Be sure to like and comment, if we want to talk about the book. I love to hear from people. I like talking to you guys. So, and then be sure to, always subscribe. It helps the channel out a lot. Thanks for watching.